begin by acknowledging the contribution of our forefathers who have helped in creating a world based on freedom and human dignity. I extend my respect to people of diverse cultures, faiths, colors, and genders, and pledge to work for equity, inclusivity, peace, and harmony. A very good morning to one and all present here. I, Dr. Manmeet Kaur, Associate Professor and Academic Coordinator, Media School at Delhi Metropolitan Education, welcome you to the 5th edition of the world's first 7-day hybrid international media conference, ICAN5. The International Media Conference, ICAN5, is being organized by DME Media School at Delhi Metropolitan Education, Noida, in collaboration with School of Communication and Creative Arts, Deakin University, Melbourne, Australia. I would like to take a moment and introduce Delhi Metropolitan Education to our audience. It is a A-grade premier educational institute affiliated to Guru Gobind Singh Indraprasth University and approved by the Bar Council of India. DME Media School is one of the most promising media institutes in the country, and it offers BA in journalism and mass communication. It is recognized as a school focused on the growth of its faculty members and students through academic and co-curricular activities. Major flagship events and initiatives of the school includes BG Varghese Lecture Series, peer-to-peer FDPs, International Film Festival SIFI, International Media Conference ICAN, Ritika Convention of Media Students, and newly added to the list is Vibrant India Series. ICAN5 has come up with the theme, inclusivity, convergence, and alternative negotiations with hashtag communication for all. ICAN5 has the support of 17 partners, including International Association of Media and Communication Research, IAMCR Gender Section, and GMEC Global Media Education Council as the conference partner. Knowledge partners for ICAN are Makhanlal Chaturvedi, National University of Journalism, Bhopal, Vigyan Prasar, Government of India, and Keshav Suri Foundation, KSF. For ICAN5, international partners are Institute for International Journalism, Ohio University, USA, Green University, Bangladesh, and Daffodil International University, Bangladesh. The media partners for ICAN5 are Amar Ujala, The Policy Times, Jai Hind Times, and the Hindi Post. It is my immense pleasure to tell you that cultural partner for ICAN5 is Beaconhouse National University, Pakistan. And it gives me immense pleasure to announce that this session is supported by Beaconhouse National University, Pakistan. ICAN5 is powered by Asian Media and Cultural Studies Network from Australia, Australia-India Film Practitioners and Researchers Network, SPARC, the Student Council of DME Media School, and Research and Innovation in Media, the Research Cell of DME Media School. The conference is also supported by NOTO, National Organ and Tissue Transplant Organization. Since 2018, DME Media School is organizing the International Media Conference ICAN. ICAN5 will witness a total 26 sessions, including 18 live sessions, 5 hybrid sessions, and 3 physical sessions. The schedule comprises of 10 technical sessions, 3 workshops, 2 masterclasses, 2 plenary sessions, and 5 panel discussions. Proud to mention here that all the technical sessions, the 10 technical sessions, are being chaired by the women academicians and scholars from India and different countries. It gives me immense pleasure that ICAN5 will go live on the official Facebook page of DME for various sessions. And for this session, we are live on our Facebook page. For more information, please follow our social media handles, and we will be sharing the links in our chat box very soon. Today, we all have gathered here for workshop 2, Lahore-Delhi Documentary Films Workshop. Our esteemed panelists joined us today, Dr. Wajiha Raza Rizvi from Pakistan, Nasira Habib from Pakistan, Dr. Gauri Chakraborty from India, Aradhana Kapur from India. Now I invite Professor Dr. Amrish Saxena, Dean DME Media School and convener ICAN5 to give his opening remarks of this session.
I begin today by acknowledging the contribution of our forefathers who have helped in creating a world based on freedom and human dignity. I extend my respect to people of diverse culture, faith, color, and gender, and pledge to work for equity, inclusivity, peace, and harmony. So I welcome everybody in this session because this is a session of a different kind. Wherein we have collaborated with scholars from Pakistan, and we have tried to create a workshop which is not usually part of any academic conferences, but since right from the beginning we have been trying to design ICAN, and not on a very customary basis, but to have such kind of sessions which are from not from the tradition, but then wherein such things can be done which contribute in one way or the other to the enhancement of knowledge or enrichment of knowledge. And for this session, the sole credit goes to Dr. Wajiha Raza Rizvi, who came out with this idea that let us do this kind of workshop. And initially, the initial thought was to have a workshop on the whole documentary film production process. But as time moves on, other people joined hands. So Dr. Gauri Chakraborty, she was roped in, and she really agreed to be part of this workshop. And then Aradhana Kohli Kapur, who is a renowned filmmaker in India, she also came on board. And then Nasira, Habib also came on board, and that is how it became a very rich panel wherein there are people from media academics and also from the filmmaking, and a combination of the two, wherein the media educators are also making film, and that filmmaking, this documentary filmmaking, is for a cause. So the additional things which further were added to this workshop is that it is focusing on women's education, the girls' education. So women are again come to the fore, and the theme of this year's conference is again inclusivity, wherein we are trying to take up issues of women. We are trying to take up issues of all other genders, and such kind of sessions also we have already held on the issues of LGBTQ 2 days ago. And today also, immediately after this session, there will be a session in the physical space in DME, wherein people belonging to transgender, they will be coming to our institute, and there will be a live session in Studio 62. So that way we are also addressing the women's issue in this session. And then obviously education, we all belong to the education fraternity, either as educators and teachers or as students. So for us, the important aspect of our life becomes education, and otherwise also for the development of any country, be it India or Pakistan, education is one thing which can contribute immensely in every aspect of our lives, and which can help us to move forward, and in creating a better society, a society wherein every human being has his or her own dignity. So with these words, I welcome all our panelists, all our resource persons in this workshop, and people have joined in Studio 62 of DME, the experts and the resource persons, the experts have joined from Pakistan, and then obviously all other people are on Zoom. So let us hope that this session will bring certainly some new light on the issues that we are discussing. It will also add some value to the budding filmmakers or the filmmakers who are there in this session, as to how a documentary can be made, going into the whole process of the filmmaking, and also how very socially relevant issues and topics can be picked up, which go to a big extent to the development of society. So thank you all for joining this session, and I'm looking forward to having a very lively and fruitful session. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. I'm happy to share that Journalism at DME is the official newsletter of DME Media School. This fortnightly publication covers all the major activities happening in and out of the campus. It is a student-centric newsletter carried out entirely by them under the supervision of the faculty members. DME TV is the official YouTube channel of DME, where you can find the playlist related to various sessions, lectures, conferences, film festivals. And for ICAN5, all the playlist has been uploaded on official YouTube channel of DME. So proceeding towards the session, I would like to introduce our esteemed experts for today's workshop. Professor Dr. Wajiha Raza Rizvi, an accomplished expert trained in USA, UK, and Norway. She is also the co-chair of the Gender Communication section of International Association of Media and Communication Research, and was also the project director to set up Department of Films and Television at NCA. She studied at NCA Lahore, was awarded Chugati Award for Excellence in Design. She then received scholarship under FCO SAS to study television production techniques at Northeast Media Training Center, European Media School. She has been working for the public and private sectors and has about 100 television productions and commercials to her credit. She produced 65 SAF Stars quiz shows to raise funds for the 9th SAF Games among the 7 SAARC nations in Pakistan in 2001. She went on Fulbright to Oklahoma State University, specializing in film research and production. She is internationally published, and her work is included in readings for courses at the University of US Army War College. Presently, she is working on the censorship of visual pleasure in Pakistani cinema. I welcome you, ma'am. The next expert of today's workshop is Dr. Gauri Chakraborty. She graduated from Asia's premier institution, Film and Television Institute of India, Pune, and has been a part of the audio-video industry since 1995. She has worked with BBC, WST on HIV awareness in India. Ma'am was the associate producer for the award-winning film Sheep Thief and anchor assistant producer on Zee India for Arts and Culture program, Best of India. She is a practicing filmmaker, academician, and artist. Ma'am has been a media educator for the last 17 years and co-headed a top media school from 2017 to 2021. She has been resource person for various UGC refresher programs and member of IAMCR and IAWRT. Dr. Gauri was the festival director at IAWRT, AWFF 2019. She has received the 100 Women Faces Award from the Center for Women Entrepreneurs in 2018. She is the editor of the book Balancing the Wisdom Tree, Anthology of FPII's Women Alumni, released in 2022. At present, she is serving as Professor, Times School of Media, Bennett University. I welcome you, ma'am. The next expert for today's workshop is Nasira Habib. Ma'am is an educationist, gender specialist, environmentalist, and organic gardener. She graduated from the University of Essex, England, the Institute of Social Sciences, Netherlands, and the University of London. For over 25 years, she has worked on various aspects of women's adult education, formal and non-formal elementary and early childhood education. In the process, she has analyzed policy, conducted academic, socio-economic, and action research, worked on alternative education, developed curriculum and educational materials and aids, developed a new method of teaching literacy, designed and run community development programs, mobilized and organized communities, and participated in public-private partnership schemes. She has pioneered an alternative approach to education that is relevant, integrative, and gender responsive. She has trained teachers, development workers, and women's rights activists in and outside Pakistan. She had been going to India for a decade, training teachers in approach and methodology in Hyderabad and Bangalore. She has authored in English and Urdu, from manuals for teachers to textbooks for learners to study on various educational, gender, and environmental aspects, published in Pakistan, India, Malaysia, Germany, and England. She runs a YouTube channel titled Nasira Habib, where she shares her approach and method of relevant and integrative education and her experiments, and experiences in organic and ecological gardening. She is a winner of an FAO award. She is the founder and director of Khoj Society for People's Education, founder of Organica Pakistan, and a freelance consultant. I welcome you, ma'am. The next panelist of the session is Dr. Aradhana Kapur. She is currently engaged in Digitally Yours, an initiative to make online education accessible in post-corona times for children whose schools are shut and have no devices from which they can access the internet. She also works with the school students in outreach programs to enhance environmental literacy amongst them, especially underprivileged children from the slums. Ma'am also supports the National Cancer Society and other non-governmental organizations by contributing towards their communication goal. She extensively works with young girls and women in bastis, urban slums in Delhi and NCR in different programs. She has worked with Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, Doordarshan India, Ministry of Environment and Forest, Ministry of HRD, Department of Women and Child International Labour Organization, UNICEF, British High Commission, Tata, BP Solar, Ekta Parishad, Cure India. With over 2 decades of experience in developmental social communication, she has made programs on various subjects for many organizations, both government and non-government organizations. I welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you very much for inviting us here today. I and Nasira Habib from Pakistan have joined. Nasira specializes in education, and the kind of content we have in both the films. I thought she was the best expert to comment on the content of the film. And because she has been associated with education for a very long time, and you might have noticed that Nasira Habib also appears in the film as an interviewee. So I thought that Aradhana Kapur from India and myself, today we will discuss the content of 2 films from India and Pakistan. It would help us look at the situation in the 2 countries. It would help us understand what's happening to education in the 2 countries and how people consider female education in the 2 countries as well. And as you might have noticed, that these 2 films have some elements in common and some elements very different from each other, because these 2 have been produced by 2 different persons. You can understand these 2 people approached the same film quite differently from each other. So if you look at the film from Pakistan, you would realize that it's not only shot in It was originally planned to be shot in Lahore only, but we decided that we should cover something from the 4 provinces of Pakistan. Pakistan is a much smaller country than India. So I think it was partly easy for us. And secondly, because these 4 provinces are very different from each other. And there are some urban settings and some rural settings. So we decided that content might be interesting for people. So you would have noticed that we covered public sector schools, we covered government schools, and we covered non-profit schools run by non-profit organizations. And that's how we ended up with the content we have there. You may have noticed that the 2 films are very different from each other. For example, if we are talking about documentary films, we are definitely talking about the opening scenes and the concluding scenes. And between the 2, we realize that the middle part is the longest part of every documentary. You may have noticed that the first film is like Pakistani film is different in the sense that it is talking about the status of education in Pakistan in general. It's talking about what happens to women's education, and it begins with the constitutional coverage for education in the country. That's how you end up seeing a note from Article 25 of Pakistan Constitution, that it is the state's responsibility to provide education to everyone under 16 and in school, etc. And you may have noticed that the Indian film opens with shots of children from school, girls from school, and I thought these 2 films had very different openings, and they were very interesting. And the Indian film in particular is particularly focusing on economic condition in the country. And the girls' desire to participate to empower themselves economically and to make the films better. So we specially requested that everyone, all the students present here and all participants here, we requested them to see the films before we start discussing the content of the films, because we thought it will be interesting for us to discuss how the two films were made in terms of production process. We know that films have voiceover, films have interviews, and films have many other things in terms of production elements. We know that we are talking about A and B roll, and we are talking about images, and we are also talking about sound. So it's sometimes very interesting that when you talk about documentaries, is documentary really including 6 types of sound in it? So I thought we would be interested in taking some questions from everyone participating in the session today. And I guess that I would be interested in hearing something from Aradhana, Kohli, Kapur, if she wishes to add something to the discussion that I just started, so we can continue comparing the situations, and Nasira, Habib can continue at least giving us some comments about the status of education in Pakistan. And I believe my Indian colleagues and Dr. Sumita Bala, Dr. Gauri, and Dr. Amrish Saxena and everyone else from India can help us elaborate on the Indian part. Yes, please.
Thank you, Professor Wajiha. And I think it's an opportune moment to, since you mentioned, a slight comparison in the way in which the films looked at the issue of girl education. They were from the eyes of 2 different filmmakers. I would like to invite Aradhana to comment on her views regarding the same. And then I also wish to open the house to the young students, because like mentioned, they have seen both the films, and we'd be very curious to understand from them the initial impressions that they have formed about both the issue of girl education and the way the productions took shape. So Aradhana, I would like you to make a brief comment on both the films, and then over to you students. All of us would really appreciate your initial comments and questions, especially to Nasira Habib ma'am, who was actively part of the film on education in Pakistan, and to Aradhana ma'am, who is also involved with educating the girl child in India.
Thank you so much, Gauri. Thank you very much. I, before sharing yarn, really wanted to hear what the young people here have to say about the films. But very briefly, when I saw both the films and I kind of revisited the films, my initial take was that they're very different, obviously, because we are talking about very different milieus. In terms of the production process also, they're very different. So, you have one film, which is a very, the film from Pakistan is a very classic documentary, which has a narrative, which, focuses on a problem, which comes with the solution, gives you statistics. And then you have a very different film from India, which I would like to, make it very clear at this point that this is really not a film which is talking about the status of girl education in India. It's a film which kind of comes in the genre of poetic documentary films, where this filmmaker has visited this what to me comes as a safe haven for these young girls who are destitute. They come from very poor and marginalized families in this very remote part of Maharashtra. And you see there is no narrative. The entire film is with the children speaking from their gut, what their feelings are, what they feel about. Why we included it? Because it talks about education as a means, as a way out of poverty, out of destitution, and the importance of education for girl children. So in that way, we felt the films are very complementary to each other, both in the production style and in the content. Having said that, I would, Gauri, really like to hear what the young people have to say about these films. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aradhana. And we will now move over to the students. Dr. Manmeet, please help us get the initial comments from the students.
Definitely, ma'am. There are few questions from the students as well. Yash Kohli wants to ask one question.
Good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Yash Joshi. I have a question about filmmaking. What kind of ground work is required to making a documentary filmmaking?
That's a very good question to begin the session, Yash. And Professor Wajiha, I request you to respond to it, and then Nasira ma'am can also respond to that. What are the initial steps that were taken to create the documentary that we saw from Pakistan? Over to you, Professor Wajiha.
Right. Thank you, Yash Joshi, for the question. When we started making the film from Pakistan, the initial idea was to we were producing the film for International Women's Day. And we decided that, initially started as some sort of Lahore-Delhi kind of project. We decided that we will produce a film from Pakistan and a film in India, and we will bring these two films to some discussion forum at some point in future. But it so happened that this is the first time these two films have been brought to this discussion forum today. So basically, this film was originally created with the idea to compare with something in India. So you can see that it was produced, if you have seen the last frame, it actually shows that it was sponsored by American Embassy in Pakistan. And so naturally, we started the conception process. We decided that we will name it Pakistan Education and Women. And the original idea was to shoot it in the Lahore and in the nearby areas. There was no beginning at that point because as you can see that everything that has been added, as I mentioned before, that we included public sector and private sector and non-profit type of education sector within the film. So you can say that then we started looking at online regarding what's happening within the education sector. So we found that Punjab Education Foundation was doing something different from Sindh Education Foundation, and non-profit organizations and public and private sectors were doing something totally different. So we had different concepts that how we could present the documentary. We thought probably we could take a student from each of these places. But as you can see that this narrative is actually not about students from 3 different types of education sectors. Then we decided that we will, during the research process, we found a number of short stories that were posted by Sindh Education Foundation online. These were stories of women from the Sindh area in particular, and women who had shifted from Balochistan to Sindh, and they were no longer called Balochis, they were rather called Barochis. So you can see that their movement from one part of Pakistan to another had changed their identity a bit, and we were learning all these different things. We learned that, for instance, you might have noticed there were scenes from Manchar Lake. And in Manchar Lake area, people were talking about, like higher literacy rate at the time of partition, because when I asked somebody, an old man, how and why he never, for instance, went to school, and he said, my grandfather was educated. And, it was very heartbreaking. We were learning that grandfather was educated, but over a period of 70 years, his family and children had lost education, and the education was brought to Manchar Lake after a very long time. So you can say that we were going to places and we were looking for personal narratives and personal stories of people. And as you may have noticed that when I coordinated with Nasira Habib, so Nasira actually not only added plenty of material to the film, which you can say that the film has a good B-roll, because we were not just talking about interviews, or the voiceover, we were talking about good content that could be, that could enhance the quality or the video or images of the film. So you can say that it came through the contribution of everyone else that is there. And all the interviews were adding things, and they were helping us develop the content in a better way.
Yeah.
If needed, I think at some point we can certainly show some clips of the films as well. For example, if students, if anyone, like, I think it will make it better at some point if we were adding, if we were just showing opening scenes or parts that I found similar when students talk about, like interviewees talk about, for instance, domestic behavior and other things, like economic part, etc. So, yeah.
Professor Wajiha, the students have watched the films today morning as well.
Right.
And I'm sure it's fresh in their memories because it just happened before we began the workshop. And ma'am, just to add to Yash's question, I'm sure you would agree that in kind of structuring a documentary, the role of experts who are on the ground working on the subjects become very critical. And I think Nasira ma'am's presence here is also part of that process where you and Nasira ma'am have collaborated. We would also request Nasira ma'am to talk about how critical it was for the film to identify, the main areas of concern when it came to girl children and education in Pakistan. So Nasira ma'am, if you could add to the comments made by Professor Wajiha.
Thanks a lot. Sorry. Yeah, actually, you talked about the critical aspects of education which were needed to be needed to include in the documentary. Actually, the most important thing about girls' education is that there are generally education is taken when we talk about education, when we start discussing the whole purpose of education. So it is never talked about how we should approach girls' education and in what ways girls' education should be different from boys' education. We always talk about, when we talk about education and when we talk about girls' education, we always talk about numbers. And we always talk about the missing facilities. I mean, the schools have 4 walls or not, schools have latrines or not, schools have drinking water or not. But to me, my experience at the grassroots for over 30 years, and I was simultaneously involved into research and policy level also. For me, the biggest issue is that when we talk about girls' education, we must talk about those social barriers which create a serious problem in education. And the second thing, which is, I think is most important, is that if we just focus on some textbooks, that girls, they go to schools and they are made to read or memorize those textbooks and come out of the schools. So my observation over the more than 30 years is, and you may find it, and the audience may find it very strange when the comments I'm going to make. So what I have noticed in the, because I have worked over 20 years in the villages and over 20 years in the urban centers also. So what I have noticed when we talk about girls' status in society or women's status in society, so what my experience and my observation is that rural women who are part of the rural economy, who are part of the social structures, I have seen them more independent than the urban girls and women who go to school, they get a certificate or a degree. So in my opinion, so girls, instead of getting empowered through this education, they actually get disempowered. So for me, this is a very, very serious issue. And that then that takes us to the whole issue of curriculum. So it is not only so the curriculum, but we need to be very cautious when we talk about curriculum. Because when we talk about curriculum, okay, we can have documents, there are very pious intentions and very good guidelines in the documents, but nothing translates into textbooks and especially into teaching methods. So the most important thing is that not only all these issues the girls are facing, like in the film also, what we see that girls are talking about their fathers, uncles, brothers, they are aghast, they're going to school. And then we see that those girls of yesterday who could not get educated themselves, they wanted to send their daughter to schools. So in that process, what my understanding is that we need to not only educate girls when we send to schools, the education should be of a kind that includes grooming also, that grooms them into empowered, independent human beings, which can be politically conscious also, socially conscious also. So I feel that in this documentary, there are certain issues like these I have just raised. They are also touched upon, though not because if you are talking too much about these issues, maybe then the documentary is not taken the way it should be taken. So it was a good attempt to highlight these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Nasira ma'am. In fact, for these young students and those online, you know, when we were watching both the films, a logical question that comes to mind is, what next? And I think, Nasira ma'am, you have really responded with you know, with that beacon of light, that if anybody wants to continue with this discourse on girl education, one aspect of it is also what is the curriculum, you know, and how gender sensitive is the curriculum, you know, let's say over the subcontinent, which enables or empowers those who are entering the formal education system. Since Nasira ma'am, you also, you and Professor Wajiha talked about the background to the film, I must tell the house that we sent questionnaire to the director of the Indian film, Ganga Mukhi, who is a trained filmmaker. And she could not join us, but she sent her response. And it really echoes with what Nasira ma'am was just right now saying, you know, in terms of the urban-rural view or prejudice that we have on education, you know, in both the countries. And Ganga has to say that where did the motivation for the film come? So she's saying that during my schooling years, in a co-ed institute in a small town, there were 2 new fresh admissions. And they joined my class in 9th grade. These were 2 girls who had completed their education until then in a girls' convent, just beyond our school boundary walls. I sensed with a pang that these girls seemed to have a strong sense of selfhood. They appeared more confident and self-assured than many of us in the co-ed and seemed to hold themselves above us. over the years, meeting friends and neighbors or acquaintances who had studied in girls' schools and colleges, I sensed some distinct air about them. Yet I still felt that my father had been more progressive by sending me to a co-ed school. So my initial proposal to PSBT, which is the Public Service Broadcasting Trust, was to look at the impact of a girls' school on the identity formation of young girls. I imagined that was a sense of containing some degree of repression, denial in sending girls to a girls' school. So this is where, the background for Kanya Shala comes in. And then obviously PSBT had some comments, and then Gangamukhi was asked to look at a different perspective, which he chose with Kanya Shala, where students actually come and stay to receive education. So another question from the house will be welcome. I think we've had a very good perspective on the film Pakistan, Education and Women. Any more questions that the house may have?
Yes, ma'am. We have one more question.
Greetings, everyone. Myself, Ishika Shah, a first-year BAJMC student. Ma'am, my question to you is, since fictions have dominated web OTT platforms, what do you think? How documentaries make their way among viewers?
Okay, and your name is?
Ma'am, Ishika Shah.
Ishika. So I'll just put that question in perspective, which is that you're saying there's a domination of fiction on OTT, streaming, and where would you place the documentary? Maybe I can ask Aradhana to comment on it and then move to Professor Wajiha.
Thank you, Gauri. Okay, Ishika, can I ask you a counter question, or to all of you? How many of you know about prehistoric cave paintings? Are you aware of them? There are many in India. There are many sites. What is there in those paintings?
The stories behind or any of the incident or the story which they do or they paint there.
I see a boy raising a hand, and I should be gender sensitive. Please. We always have this girl first policy.
Those paintings depict about the cultures and their traditions which they used to follow. And
right. So thank you so much. Your name?
Pratham Dhawan.
Okay, Pratham. So Pratham, Ishika, and everyone else, those guys didn't have TikTok. They couldn't make videos and reels, and they didn't have mobile phones. But they did have the desire to share what was happening, which is what is basically at the genesis of documentaries. We want to share what is happening in our life, So there were these simple hunting scenes in most of those paintings. Very simple drawings, hand designs, geometric shapes. But why? Because they wanted to share what was happening in their lives. They wanted to share their stories. So why documentaries, you said, Ishika, and there's so much more attraction towards OTT platforms. But if you think it through, where are those stories coming from? Where are those stories coming from? I mean, they have mega stars, they have big budgets, they have a lot of makeup, jewelry, clothes, a lot of happening stuff. I don't know what all lingo you guys use these days. What is slay? What is in? What is out? So, and then we follow those trends, in our thought processes. My belief is that there will always be people who will find actual life interesting. That's how documentaries came into being as a genre. Google Devta will tell you there are 3 kinds, there are 6 kinds, these are the components, these are the elements. I don't need to go into that really, because you can just Google it and find out. But the fact that we have stories and we want to share those stories, and there are many ways of sharing those stories, really. So when you take a video of yourself at a holiday place and you share it with your friends, what are you doing? Documenting. So to my mind, a documentary will always have a place in our society to share our stories, our messages, our thoughts, our feelings. They can be given different names. They can be given a lot of, labels of what kind of documentary, what genre it comes from, how was it made, which is important as a
as ma'am will tell you, as a film teacher, yes, all that is more important. But as a practitioner, I'll tell you that what you want to say is more important. And how you say comes secondary. Thanks. Thank you, Aradhana. I think, Professor Wajiha, this may also be a time to talk to the students about the documentary ecosystem, on how independent filmmakers engage with the documentary format. Professor Wajiha shared with you that the film was supported by the American Center in Pakistan. And here, this film from India was supported by PSBT. So, Professor Wajiha, would you like to comment on the ecosystem that supports, that still allows the documentary, to exist and also get propagated in the, amongst audiences, and get acknowledged, for what it was trying to say?
Right. I would like to add to what Aradhana Kohli said and what you are asking, and the original question by the student as well. See, if we look a bit back, when the films first started, for example, the first film clips ever produced were actually actualities. Something, something that happened in India. If it was even a wrestling match, you may have come across that clip, and even arrival of trains. So if you're talking about, how it all started, we did not start with fiction. As a matter of fact, we started with many of these things, short films produced over 100 years ago, or about 125 years ago. They were all news clips of some sort. So you can say that people were actually curious about real stories. And over a period of time, and with the expansion of digital technologies and all these media and channels, and even our way of communication with each other, you must have noticed that digital technology actually broke this monopoly of Hollywood fiction, for example, across the world. And India and America, as they offer the world's largest cinemas, and they manipulate the world of fiction in the world, which is very correct. But at the same time, we know there are channels that offer documentary films. And right now, many of us are actually communicating and sharing our ideas with each other. We have documentary actually offers many methods of productions. There's a great variety. And you would have noticed that in case of film, if you are first writing a complete story, it's a script and screenplay and dialogues before shooting the fiction film. In terms of documentary, you come across multiple methods, far more methods for production of documentaries. So I would say that documentaries actually offer a greater variety in terms of production methods. You are talking about, for instance, reconstruction. You are talking about something which has just voiceover laid with number of other methods. Then you're talking about compilation films and many other ways of producing documentaries. For instance, if you're talking about one of the American films, it has become a classic over a period of time, Atomic Cafe. This film actually constitutes research of over 40 years of work. Whatever was produced about with this theme of atom bomb, etc. And you would know that this is a documentary film that makes you laugh. So when we are talking about documentary films, most of the times we are not talking about laughter. We are not talking about, like something which offers, which criticizes things in a funny manner. So you would know that the film offers a new genre within the documentary film. Then you talk about real footage, for example, World War II footage, etc., and 26 episodes of, 26. America actually produced 26 episodes of documentary films based on real World War II footage, whereby Japanese were attacking American ships in the sea. Right. So you would know that even documentaries can have episodes, and right now you're talking about, like more than one episode. So actually documentaries have their own viewers, and there is basically no doubt about it. Uh, Victory at Sea, and then after America produced Victory at Sea, UK also produced War in the Air. And you would know, so documentaries offer a great content. I have a question for students, and I hope Dr. Bala can actually ask students the same question on my behalf. I want to know if they recall particular scenes from the two documentaries that they have seen, because I would be interested in discussing the concepts within those scenes, because there were certain scenes that were talking about access and parity when it comes to gender education. There were scenes that were talking about economic empowerment in Kanya and apart from, destitution is one thing, and these girls were offering a great desire to help their families and to support their families, and they were talking about their grandmothers insisting, so experience of one generation was passed on to next generation, and the power of education was realized. So I would be suggesting that if students can mention particular scenes from both the films, we can certainly discuss those things as well.
Sure. So I think those students who are online, it'll be nice if you could write on the chat box. And for the students who are present in the studio, I'm sure, some scenes have left an imprint. We were talking about the granny and the little child, actually, on how the grandmother, talks back and, kind of pushes the young girl to. So we were talking about genealogy, on how across generations. So I'd want one of the students, or multiple actually, if there's some scene that has stayed back with you, please do feel free to discuss it at this forum right now. Sasha, is there a scene that stayed back with you? Anybody in the house? Any specific scene which has retained, which has kind of stayed back with you? You were noticing how complicated it must have been to capture it on camera, because both the films have certain sequences. If you think of how the filmmaker has been able to, create that intimacy, create that trust with the person being interviewed, it'll be interesting to see what your responses are. Yes, I think we have a response.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vishnu Priya, and I'm a research scholar from Bennett University. The scene that specifically stayed with me was the last scene of the movie, where there was a poetry of a person who was talking about the name. And she said that when I was in my parents' house, I was called by the name of my father. And when I got married, people started calling me by my husband's name. And then when I gave birth to a child, then people started calling me from my child's name. But my actual name is Satara. So that was the scene that stayed back with me.
And it runs over the credits. So actually, it's a darkened space, and, the audio is playing on your mind after you've seen the film. Professor Wajiha, the end credits and the poetry has stayed with Vishnu Priya. So if you would like to comment on that.
Yeah, I would say that that was, because the film started with Bakhtawar's interview. She was a girl from Sindh area, and she claimed that she was the first from her village to go to school, and she started when she was 10 years old. And in the beginning of the film, the father says, father sent her to school, but her uncle, asked his sons to throw stones on her if she was going to school. But in the last part of the film, as she's talking about the closing part, I would say that as Nasira earlier mentioned, that the messages that we pass on are extremely important. And the last part, this narrative is actually focusing on women's identity, because when we talk about social messages, we know that in Pakistan, and I believe in some parts of India, women are not known by their own names. So this part was actually included in the textbook that Sindh Education Foundation was using for adult education, because Bakhawar was running 2 schools. You might have noticed that she was running a primary school for young children. So she had all children in one classroom from grade 1 to grade 5. And in the adult center, she was reading from the textbook, and it talked about Maiki mein kehlati thi Fazal Deen ki beti, which means that she was known by her father's name when she was a kid. And when she got married, people did not know that her name was Sitara. Everybody called her by her husband's name. And when she had a son, she was, known by her son's name. So woman's identity was replaced by male's identity in their family. Even the youngest male in the family, the son's name was used to recall her, to call the woman. So I think that part was extremely important, because that was pointing to identity crisis women have in Pakistan. And as Nasira said earlier, in fact, when she mentioned that in a way, village women are more empowered than educated women from urban places, I agree with her, because I remember that one of my colleagues from a newspaper in the past, when I was working for a newspaper, actually he was triple PhD. People don't do 3 PhDs, but he had done 3 PhDs in human resource psychology and journalism. So Dr. Arshad Islam actually mentioned, I was talking to him about something, and he said that he knows girls from villages who are only, like they have passed only 10 grades. And if they face this crisis, they actually can stand and face, for instance, their in-laws. Because Kanya Shala talks a lot about abuse or harassment kind of issues. So Dr. Arshad Islam in Pakistan also said that less educated women can take a stand, and more education makes women sometimes very weak, because they are more polite and they can't take a stand for themselves or face people in the manner. So I think this is another part that needs some investigation. Thank you for asking that question, because it actually points to identity crisis and social problems that Nasira mentioned earlier.
And Professor Wajiha, I think it's also about authorship, the way that sequence has been placed at the end. So in terms of, the documentary filmmaker, the filmmaker has the choice of weaving the narrative. And I think, the placement of that poetry towards the end almost closes one narrative and begins another. And I think that's what's really fantastic about it. I would also, because Nasira ma'am is here and we would like to, kind of talk to her as well. This documentary, both the documentaries are also about creating intimacy with who you are talking to the effect that whether it's a little girl or a young person or the men who are talking back in the documentary are able to express themselves freely. And I would like to talk to both Aradhana and Nasira ma'am on, what were the factors that the interviews of the men in the film from Pakistan, they were so candid. I mean, so how does the documentary filmmaker create an atmosphere where the person you're interviewing is very candid about their opinions? So Nasira ma'am, if you would like to comment on that, please.
Call Nasira ma'am. I would like to request Dr. Manasvi to please keep an eye on the chat box as well. I'm sure we will be having more questions from our online audience as well.
Yes, we have online audience here who have raised hand and some some comment in the chat box also. When you have asked about the scene which have touched, so there's a response from Priyanka Singh. In Kanya Shala, the scene where the girls in the class say how they feel more safe, free in the class, full of girls where there are no boys in the class. This left an impression on my mind, as the real world outside is so, how will they be able to deal with the world outside? So that's one scene which has touched Priyanka a lot. And if we are ready, we can take question from Naima. Naima is there. She has raised her hand. You can speak now.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for giving me a chance. This is Naima Arshad from Lahore School of Economics. I teach documentary making in Media Studies Department. And my question is to my teacher, my mentor, Dr. Wajiha Raza Rizvi, about the documentary from Pakistan. I wanted to ask two short questions. One is, as I have gone through the interviews, when the male members was talking about not to sending their girls to the school because it's a co-education and the boys will be there. So that one of the things. But my question is, what was the challenges when you take the interviews, because the subjects normally they don't open up, they don't talk freely about the problems, because here in Pakistan, talking to a Pathan, to a conservative society is very difficult, and especially for the male members. What was the challenges, how you have conducted, I mean, how you convince them to talk about these issues, I mean, on the camera, on the screen? Secondly, my question is, what next about this document? Who are the audience? I mean, as we know, documentaries as a social change, to bring a social change in the society. So, I mean, where the documentary will be screened, or how we can bring a change in our society, especially these conservative societies where the girl education is still a challenge. So these are my two short questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Naima. Thank you so much. I wasn't expecting, but it's very nice to see you here today. The answer to your first question is that the men you are referring to were men from a jargah. And when I went to shoot at Roshni Community Model School in a village near Peshawar, that was one building that had jargah, that had school. And, we just requested the school owner. It was a non-profit school funded by or supported by Sarad Development. It has a credit towards the end of the film. So we just requested the school owner, who happened to be the village chief as well, that if we could speak to some men from Jargah who were there at the time for Jargah. So I think you can say probably it was their chief asking them to talk about it. And it was very difficult for us to make them speak, because they started very slow, but and I think we recorded their interviews in 1 hour. Initially, they were not talking. They were just saying that it's our tradition to not send girls to school. You might have noticed there was a man who was talking about it, like we call a woman in our homes to teach Quran to girls. He surprised me, because his son was in medical school in 3rd year. And he was saying that he had not sent his daughter to school at all. And he just wanted her to study, read Quran. So I said that over a period of time, your two children will not want to know each other any further, because the gap will be so much. Like your son would be a doctor, and your daughter would be an uneducated woman, probably married to an uneducated male from that area. So how would your children know each other in future? So it was difficult. But you can say that the organization that was helping us shoot there actually helped us find these men, and they helped us speak to this man. So it was slightly difficult, but we managed. And it was interesting that the men who were initially talking about, it's our tradition not to send girls to school. The same guy, Anargul, towards the end of the film was so annoyed, I think, and I didn't want to disturb him, but he was so upset that he said that you provide uniform, you provide books, you provide schools, he was talking about access to education. And then he said that if you provide all these things, everybody will go to school. So what I learned during this process, that Professor Anita Ghulam Ali, who also appears from Sindh in the film, she also had said the same thing. She said it's not that parents do not want to send their daughters to their schools, but if they tell their daughters they don't have money to support them, because she's talking about poverty, it would hurt their daughters. So she said that they hide behind tradition. And they say that it's not our tradition to send you to school, but actually it is that they cannot afford and when they have to choose between their sons and daughters, they actually support their sons. So the film is actually shouting these things. Nasra also mentioned that it's important to change the message. And when you were saying that where we would screen this documentary has been screened on International Women's Day at a school in US, and I think they had about 1,000 audience in the auditorium discussing the content of the film. Yes, it's not distributed like a fiction film, but I think documentaries have their own audiences.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. So, Nasira ma'am, would you like to add on something, or?
Yeah, I will actually share our own experience. When Wajiha and her team came to our education program in the school, so they it was not one day that they spent there. It was a lot of, I remember Wajiha chatting with children and mingling with children and taking their photos. And I mean, I still have those photos with me. They are finding it so amusing that she's taking, they are playing and she's taking photos, she's chatting with them and all that. So it relaxes them a lot. And then we have that famous game, what in Punjab we call Kokla Chipaki. So they were playing, children were playing in the school ground. And she actually, I think that is part of, you can see a glimpse of that in the documentary also. So they were so relaxed. And the another element I must add on is that see, like when Wajiha and her team came to shoot, so they came to a place where our NGO is called Khoj Society for People's Education. So Khoj has been working there for like more than 16, 17 years. And we had a relationship of trust and confidence built already with the community. So if there are people who come to us and we introduce them to the community. So this is a two-way process that obviously the team, people who are shooting and recording, and they have to build a rapport with them. And the third thing I would say, again, I would say the same thing, that village people, they are much more confident, and they have a lot of self-confidence, and they believe in their capabilities. That if they are asked this question, then they can respond to that with confidence. So Punjab in that sense is different. And as Wajiha has shared her experience from Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and that is also her interaction with that man. So there are many different factors which make it very easy. And when you see the document, it sounds and it looks very natural and very intimate. So all different factors, they play their role. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. Manasvi, any more questions in the chat box?
Nothing as of now.
Okay, fine. So with this, I would like to add something here. I would like to ask one question from Wajiha ma'am as well as from Nasira ma'am, that it's been 7 years of this documentary, Pakistan Education and Women. So have you seen any change or any impact in 2022? Wajiha ma'am, Nasira ma'am, anyone?
Yeah.
I think Nasra would be best to comment on that part, because as you can see, that I am more associated with higher education. And film is particularly talking about, what comes under Article 25 of the 25A of the Constitution, that it is state's responsibility to provide education to everyone. So I would request Nasira to answer that question.
Yeah. Actually, after 7 years, if we things don't happen in a vacuum, so we have to talk about the political happenings also in the country, and how the society shapes up due to those political realities. So I would say that in the last 7 years, instead of moving forwards, our society has gone backwards. And I can talk about the single national curriculum that was introduced by the previous government. That also, if you analyze that curriculum, those textbooks, that is actually creating a very big hurdle for girls' education, or for girls moving forward, marching forward to actualize their potential. Because in the last few years, I would say that in the last 15 years or so, the things, the religion has been used a lot to keep girls and women at bay. Religion is used to deny them a lot many things. And says the same has happened in the field of education also. So instead of moving forwards, we are, I would say, in the political and social sense, we are facing with this reality of less opportunities for girls and women in Pakistan now, and the challenge is much greater for women's empowerment and for women's development, and a lot more work needs to be done to highlight the issues in girls' education, an education that is empowering and liberating. So we have a long way to go still. So I don't think that we have, in the last 7 years, we have made many strides. And you have to think, if such narrative that is, I would say, anti-women, anti-girls narrative is sponsored by the state, or very quietly by the government actions. So we are going through more challenging times. Thank you.
Right. Okay.
Thank you, Nasira ma'am, for those comments. On the earlier point, Manmeet, where we are talking about intimacy, I must share Ganga Mukhi, the director's version of how she got little girls to talk on camera, what we were discussing also with the other film. So Ganga has, kind of commented that, it wasn't easy for young people to talk on camera, young girls especially, because they thought they will be risking themselves by speaking candidly. And so the team decided to do two strategies. First, they did a late evening shoot after classes in the school ground away from the classroom. The girls relaxed and smiled and breathed, and that's when they got some of their most important segments. And the other was that they decided to talk to the day boarders outside the school and away from home too. They suggested a small open place, and the filmmaker, like we were discussing how there's a milieu created, or a space created for the men to talk in the other film. In the same way, Ganga created a space for the young girls to talk. In terms of the impact and the status of let's say, education in the country at the moment, let's say on the Indian side, I would request Aradhana to share her experiences, especially of the last 2 years, because the pandemic has really changed the narrative in terms of girls' education in India. So maybe that will also add to the information of the house.
Thank you, Gauri, and thank you, Nasira ji and Wajiha. It's been really so enriching to hear you both. Just because so many things have come to my mind also while listening to you, and because these young students are here. So it may seem like very candid and, seamlessly flowing one into the other. But believe me, as a practitioner, as a documentary filmmaker, a lot of hard work goes in it. I can share with you as a student filmmaker, when I was at Jamia and I was doing my master's, and I did my student film on GB Road, which is a very famous red light area of Delhi. And the minute I would enter the quotas and start talking to the women, and they would say, will you have tea? And I didn't drink tea at that point, and I would say, no. And then I realized that what I was doing was I was creating a huge barrier between me and the women. So that's when I started drinking tea, because after going 3 days and getting no interviews, I would sit with them, chat with them, have tea, have discussions about everything under the sun. And after that, I started getting my interviews. So as a documentary filmmaker, you have to go to your community or wherever, whoever you are shooting with, make a rapport. Even if you're working on wildlife, you're making a documentary on wildlife, you will have to go and spend hours and days stalking your animals. So that rapport has to be built. That animal will have faith in you eventually, and you will get your best shots. There is no shortcut. There is no going around that. So that is my input on that. Coming specifically to education, because since we are talking about education, I think we'll have similar stories across the subcontinent. I don't think things will be very different. But in India right now, our literacy rate, I was just going through, is, during for the 21 thing is at about 77.7%. Because I just finished a series of films in the slums in Delhi. We've had a wonderful response where our literacy levels are very up. And here I would again, take as a takeaway from the film in Pakistan, where this gentleman is saying that give them, give them uniforms, give them fees. This has actually happened in India because of the right to education, state governments giving free education, making access possible for a lot of the students. The midday meal that they get in those schools is their only meal of the day. The uniforms that they are getting is a big help for them, and that has seen a big spurt in our literacy levels. This again, I speak from experience. So when then COVID happened and when the lockdown happened, because I had seen the change it had made to these students, I was so worried that a lot of children are not getting their only meal of the day. And the Basti children, how will they access education when they don't have the devices, they don't have internet connections? So that is how, when ma'am mentioned digitally yours, that was a response to that. I bullied friends, family, everyone for devices so that we could, give them to the children and make education accessible. Interestingly, I made a small film on that, and we realized I didn't go in to make a film on girls and how, COVID had affected them and education. But it just so turned out that when I started talking to the community, the boys had access to phones. The girls didn't have access to phones because the families were scared ki boyfriend bana legi, bhag jayegi. That was one. The other one was, of course, money, because having a smartphone is expensive, and with no work, no jobs, and the lockdown, making it accessible to the girls also was difficult. So the boys got the phones, the girls didn't get the phones. So, these are the real things that you will learn. So when you're going to make a documentary, you may have an idea in your mind that this is what I want to do. But when you go and interact with the community,
that thing might change completely, and you'll start working on another way. Anything else, Gauri, that you'd like to talk?
Okay, there is a question coming up from the audience.
Wajiha was also wanted to say something on this.
My name is Pratham Dhawan. Ma'am, I would like to ask you, ma'am, as you are a documentary filmmaker, every documentary you make must have brought a different type of challenge for you. But what is the hardest challenge which you've faced till date, and what is the the most common challenge which you usually face in every documentary you make?
That's a wonderful question. Thank you. I think you'll have me talking and not stop talking now. That's another thing that comes from making documentary films. You just feel you're such a gyani. You know something about everything. मतलब तुमने तो हर चीज में PhD करी हुई है, किसी भी चीज पे बात कर सकते हो. But yeah, I've been caught in crossfire in Kashmir. I've been, in all kinds of situations I have been. But I think as a documentary filmmaker, and I'm sure Wajiha ma'am will also tell you, the biggest challenge you face, I can speak again from a personal viewpoint, is how much involvement do you have with your subject? I have sat in a basti and cried copious tears with the person I'm making the film on, because I've been so moved by what they're saying, what they're feeling, and felt so helpless that I can't do anything to help them. So as a documentary filmmaker, I think that has really been my biggest challenge, this feeling of utter helplessness, that I come from privilege. I come from a space where I have an education. Is it all right? Is it ethical to just take my camera and go and shoot and present a story? Having said that, you do realize that your films do make an impact. You are trying to get inarticulate, invisible voices and faces across medium, across platforms, where policymakers hear you, where policies are changed. So that gives you hope, and you continue to make films, I think. Or maybe we're all egoistic and we continue to say what we want to say.
Dr. Manmeet, I think,
I
think we want answer from Nasira ji also on this question, the challenges she has faced. And then Dr. Wajiha, we would like you to say something.
You mean challenges we faced in our education program at the grassroots?
Yes.
Our challenges, actually, in the early days, it a lot depends on the strategies also, but early days, there was a lot of resistance from the men in the community. And they were very candid about saying things like women are like our slaves. So, and they are God created them to serve us and all these things. So in the first place, because our program was very, very gender focused, actually more than gender, it was very women's rights focused. But when we entered the communities, we always told the communities that we are here to educate children, and we are here to educate girls. So that strategy worked to a great extent, because it is seen as something. Education is always good. When I say education can sometimes be anti-people also. So I've seen even university professors, they look at me that how can education is something so holy, how can education be anti-people? But then there were in every village, there were men who would, whatever we did, they would always stand against us. And I still remember in a meeting, in a village meeting, a man, suddenly he said, see, after you people came to our villages and you started educating girls, they have become very rude, and they have become very, they have no etiquette left with them. He said, you know, what is the job of the girls? The job of the girls is to iron our clothes, to prepare food for us, to clean the house. And now many times when we go home and we ask for this service, so that these girls, they say, no, we are studying. So you have made them very rude. So this is also a kind of resistance. But our approach was to, because the approach we had was, we never, whichever village, whichever neighborhood we went, we never contacted the village elite. So our first contact was the lowest people at the lowest ladder. So it made our work quite difficult, but in the end, that's what it paid. So I think it was it's not only then, I feel when you are working with human beings, so mysterious are not only the ways of God, mysterious are the ways of human beings also. You never know. Every day a new challenge comes up. So you have to be, you have to understand the challenge, understand the situation. And the key is that you build a real relationship with the community, with people. You sit with them, you eat with them, you do what they do. And I remember in the beginning, when we started our village program, so we intentionally, we didn't have a hi-fi vehicle, so we used to go in a taxi. So some men, they would also object to that they have come, they have taken funds from the Prime Minister's fund, and they will take the money, they will run away with the money. So, and I mean, there are, like Aradhana said, that if you start talking about the problems, they are endless. But if you are able to build a real relationship with the community, and if they start trusting you, that you believe in what is good for them, so then, see, we were able to, like, I can give you example of one village where girls, they have become leaders in the area. And it was my belief is that it was not because of the government textbooks, because we designed a whole alternative curriculum, which was women's issues focused, girls issues focused, and it was in a real sense, it was gender responsive. So the women at the end of the day, the girls at the end of the day, which emerged out of these programs, they have a lot of self-belief, and they are now they have developed into real leaders. That's why I say that we need to work on alternative curricula. We need to work on alternative system of education. Thank you.
Absolutely. Dr. Wajiha, over to you. You wanted to add on, yeah.
I just wanted to add a few things, just as Nasira mentioned that she was probably going door to door, asking people in the community to send their daughters to school.
Yes.
The same thing was happening in Sindh as well, because I know both Punjab Education Foundation and Sindh Education Foundation have been going from doors to doors. And I remember a school from Sher Shah, Karachi, and I met the family as well. And they said that the school teachers actually came to their home and asked to send their daughters to school. They probably had only 2 sons and 7 daughters. So the parents refused, because the daughters were their helping hands. They were producing curtains at home and selling in the market, which was just next door. So one day what they learned, that the daughter, who was about 9-10 years old, she actually went to school herself holding her youngest brother's hand, and she asked the school to admit her, right? So she was admitted, and then the school teachers went again to the family to inform them that they had refused, but the child had come to school herself. So it was happening not just there. Earlier, like when you mentioned that what's happening in the country, I understand that sometimes situation looks really grave. But if you look at secondary, secondary and tertiary level education in Pakistan, I would think that in the past few years, number of girls in tertiary level or university education has tremendously increased. But because especially when you go to a PhD classroom, you would all of a sudden find that there are only 2 boys in a classroom and 7 girls. So you would realize that these are PhD students. So it's very interesting that, there are all kind of situations happening in Pakistan right now. And I would say that this is more about urban kind of impression that you find more girls. And when I spoke to Mujahid Kamran, who was the Vice Chancellor of Punjab University at that time, he said that 70% girls were, gold medalists were actually girls. And I think earlier also in a village interview from a village near Lahore, one of the teachers said that promotion rate is higher among girls, like 60% girls as opposed to 40% girls are promoted. So these things are constantly changing. What was very interesting about Nasira's school, that her school was adjacent to a ghost school, a school which was established back in 1970s. After I shot at her school, I just walked with her to the other school as well. And I realized that the guy who said that he had donated that land to probably government in Bhutto's era back in 1970s, but over a period of time, when it turned into a ghost school, he acquired his land back. So it was quite interesting that Nasira schools was adjacent to this ghost school. So I think we just decided to just look at ghost schools in that area, and we realized that probably in a 20 kilometer diameter, we found many schools which had become ghost schools over a period of time. So you can say that from 1970s till now, different governments had tried establishing different schools in the area, which had turned into ghost schools over a period of time. And there was another scene in the film in which you might have noticed that children were actually playing in dirty water, and it was interesting that when I spoke to the mother, she said that these children leave school at 10 in the morning because teachers never show up. When teachers do not show up, children decide to leave school and go back, and they play in dirty water of Nala Lai, or they just go to fruit mandi, which was also very close to their house. So because people knew them, so they will just offer them free fruit for eating, etc. So all these things were quite interesting, and they were all related to like what you see in the film. And when I believe everybody here is talking about relationship with your subject. So I would say that what Kanya Shala is showing actually subject talking herself. And Pakistan education and women somehow does not directly speak to many of these students. You were actually looking at the short version. The film had a longer version as well, in which I had interviewed some of the students. So, but Kanya Shala particularly focuses on personal narratives of most of these students. And I think the other one has both personal and their parental point of view as well. And they are talking about so many different things that come in the way of girls' education. Digital age is actually changing illiterate people in Pakistan as well, because people who have specially moved to urban areas like Lahore and Karachi, they are exposed to, if I'm educated, a woman who is uneducated would instantly know the difference between me and her. And just as in Kanya Shala, a grandmother encouraged her granddaughter to study and to empower herself. I think this kind of thing is happening in real life in Pakistan as well. So actually, the film is representing reality. This is everywhere. This is in our surroundings, and we see that the women who are uneducated, they are actually encouraging their daughters to go to school right now.
Thank you, Professor Wajiha. Based on this, also want to give a perspective of Kanya Shala. Like you mentioned, the sequence of children playing with water. There is a longer sequence. I'm sure students may have noticed. There is a longer sequence of the students in Kanya Shala traveling to school. And the director specifically mentioned that, because the whole process of reaching school was difficult. They had to take a walk, then take a vehicle, then reach a particular destination. And that is why you're very right, Wajiha ma'am, in mentioning that the perspective of the person who's telling the story, the filmmaker, also comes across by how they emphasize on certain aspects. So I just thought this similarity should be shared, that the longer sequence of the students, girls reaching school in Kanya Shala is deliberate and it's done by the filmmaker for the same purpose of emphasizing on the journey itself.
Am I audible? So my question is that sometimes the issue of the documentary is very hard hitting. So how do you separate it from your own personal bias or your opinion to the kind of content that you want to show via your movies? What is the thought process behind that?
Thank you, Vishnupriya.
So I think we can pose the question to Professor Wajiha and then to Aradhana.
Wajiha ma'am, we would like to hear from you.
Sorry, I could not hear her. Could you kindly repeat the question?
Yeah, Vishnupriya, please repeat the question.
That sometimes the issues shown in the movies are really hard hitting. So how do you separate your own opinions or your personal bias from the kind of content that you want to show in your movies?
Documentary, when I use the word actuality at the start, right? We are talking about direct cinema. We are talking about facts. So yes, sometimes these stories hurt us as a human. And because we are learning about privileges that we had ourselves, and we know that these people did not have any of them. So, but it's very important to, present the verite. And because when you say that it's a fly on the wall sort of thing, you're just recording facts and passing them on. When Aradhana, Kohli, and Dr. Gauri mentioned that children take a long walk to school, when I was watching that scene, that reminded me my own childhood, because my father was posted in Rasool College, which is 2 hours drive, 2-3 hours drive from Lahore. And when he was posted there, there was another place near. There were 3 Rasools, in fact: Rasool College, Rasool Gaon, and Rasool Headworks. So I know that I had to. We went on a trolley to school in the morning, and first we walked, and then we sat on the trolley, and that helped us cross the canal, right? And sometimes if trolley did not come to pick us back, we had to walk back from Rasool Headworks to Rasool College. And I remember that was a long walk. We had to cross the canal, and then we had to walk over the road and come to our homes. So that actually reminded. So people, when they watch films, they relate to them. Times change. We moved to the city when I finished high school. And since then, I haven't lived back, but these things really matter, and these are important for everyone. Yeah. When you mention all these situations, I think it was very important. What I liked about Kanya Shala were the night scenes, and helping them talk about their real life. And I think when we talk about association or creating a relationship with your subject, so subject can open up and be comfortable with you and talk about things. So I think it's there everywhere. And when girls get empowered, as Nasra mentioned, that in a particular village, women are more empowered. I think it automatically happens when Bakhtawar was teaching women. It was interesting that Bakhtawar had funding for only 2 years from Sindh Education Foundation. And at the time I met her, she said that her funding is ending because they think literacy rate has reached in that particular village. And Sindh Education Foundation had decided to give funding to someone else in another village close by. So it's very interesting that when you cannot continue supporting one village for education, you decide that literacy is about writing or placing your signature or reading a paragraph, and you think that now women can read in this village. They can sign contracts. They don't have to just put their thumbprints on a contract or a marriage contract for that matter. So you move the funding from that village to the next village because you think that you have to improve literacy rate in the next village right now. So policy and budgeting and so many things matter, and it's interesting. It's not there in the film, but that this is what a researcher or a filmmaker learns about the society. I think filmmaking is a beautiful process that takes you to places, and there is only so much that you can show in a film. Images offer you a lot more than you actually hear within the documentary. And if you continue looking at the images, you would realize that these films have songs in them, or the local folk songs in them, and many other things in them that we are actually not discussing, but they are introducing us to new narratives about those places, and they are giving us the information about the places and people, of course.
Thank you so much, Nasira ma'am. Thank you so much, Wajiha ma'am.
Yeah. See, whatever we have been discussing, and this is in the context of both the countries, India and Pakistan, a lot has been done by the governments of the respective countries. In the constitution also, there is a provision for compulsory education or for free education. In India, it's a free education for all girls up to 10th standard or something. I think Nasira ma'am was mentioning there's some article in Pakistani Constitution, Article 25, which also provides for that education. So this is on the government front or on the legislative front. And there are educational institutions like Wajiha ma'am made this film. There are so many others in India and Pakistan. They are making films based on focusing on girls' education. So, and then there are NGOs like, as it was pointed out in the discussion, who are providing funds. Both national and international NGOs are there who are working in this area. So despite all this, both India and Pakistan, even after 75 years of independence, have not reached where we should have reached in terms of girls' education, and which I believe we all agree on this, which is the greatest impediment towards the development of societies, towards the development of the country. Because if the girls are not educated that way, I mean, everybody should get education. It's not that boys don't deserve to get education, but then if girls are not get education, then obviously India and Pakistan will not reach anywhere as far as the development yardsticks are concerned, looking at the status of the Western countries. So what do you feel? What is the greatest impediment to girls' education, and what kind of a strategy or what kind of changes need to be made in the strategy to ensure that girls' education, the universal, I mean, there is a completely, that target is achieved wherein each and every girl gets educated?
I have to respond in one sentence. I would say we could not achieve 100% education, girls' education. The simple, straightforward answer is there is no political will. Because if there is a political will in the country, it is not so difficult to achieve the target. See, I give you an example of how indifferent the government is towards literacy or these things. Our new budget, it earmarked only 3.6 billion rupees for literacy. 3.6 billion rupees is not even peanuts for the whole country. So you can see, and most of our budget, because I have analyzed our district education budgets also. So most of the budgets, like 97 to 98% of our budgets are barely enough for the salaries of teachers and the other staff. I would again say that, in my opinion, there is no political will to achieve that goal.
Yes, you're right, Nasira, because it's very important, as you said earlier also, need to improve education policy.
Every 20 years, we decide that we should not have English medium schools. So you can say that we are going in circles all the time, and this is part of bad will, just as Nasira mentioned, that if there was good political will, things would be very different.
Yes. So thank you. Thanks to all of you. I have no words to express my gratitude to Dr. Wajiha, Dr. Gauri, Nasira ma'am, and Aradhana Kapur for bringing such an interesting session for ICAN. This session was significant as we could understand the issues of girl education in India and Pakistan. And we could make out a lot of common grounds in both the countries. Filmmaking is a difficult, though an interesting activity, and it becomes more interesting if you engage with the pertinent social issues. यहाँ एक चीज और मैं कहना चाहती हूँ, हमने वुमेन्स राइट की, वुमेन एजुकेशन की बात की, लेकिन अगर सोसाइटी में मेल एजुकेशन की बात की जाए तो आधी प्रॉब्लम तो गर्ल एजुकेशन की अपने आप सॉल्व हो जाएगी, क्योंकि घर से, सोसाइटी से अगर हम डेवलपमेंट की इश्यूज की बात करते हैं तो अपने आप काफी चीजें हमारे हाथ में होंगी और हम काफी कुछ रिजॉल्व कर सकते हैं, क्योंकि ये सारे इश्यूज जो है सोसाइटी से आते हैं. एंड मेल्स, जैसे भी बात हुई कि अगर एक बच्चा मेल है, उसको आप हायर एजुकेशन के लिए, मेडिकल के लिए भेज रहे हैं और गर्ल अनएजुकेटेड है, तो ये जो हमारी थिंकिंग है, ये जो हमारी थॉट प्रोसेस एंड सोच है, वो अगर हर सोसाइटी में बदल जाए तो इस तरह की प्रॉब्लम्स नहीं आएंगी. बट नो डाउट सेशन बहुत अच्छा था. एंड एज आराधना जी सेड कि अबाउट फिल्म मेकिंग देयर इज नो शॉर्टकट. फिल्म मेकिंग में बहुत एफर्ट्स की जरूरत है और बहुत कुछ हमें करना पड़ता है, बिकॉज इट्स अ फैक्चुअल बेस्ड. फैक्चुअल हम दिखाते हैं और फैक्ट बेस्ड स्टोरी हम लेके आते हैं, तो ग्रेजुअली उसमें काम करना पड़ता है. जैसे आपने कहा कि आपको उन लोगों के संग में लाइन अप होना पड़ता है, उनसे इंटीमेसी लेवल बढ़ाना पड़ता है, उनके बीच रहना पड़ता है, तब हम ज्यादा कुछ कर सकते हैं. तो फिल्म मेकिंग इज नॉट सो इजी टास्क. फिल्म मेकिंग इज वेरी डिफिकल्ट टास्क. सो थैंक यू अगेन. थैंक्स टू वजीहा मैम, नाजिरा मैम, एंड गौरी मैम, एंड आराधना. Thank you. Thanks to all of you, and thanks to all participants in this session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I just want to announce for our online audience, there's a feedback form. Please fill that. You'll get an e-certificate for attending the workshop. Over to you, Manmeet.
My foremost thanks and heartfelt thanks to the session experts who have shared their valuable insights on the theme Lahore-Delhi documentary films, the workshop. Sincere thanks to the management of DME, Mr. Aman Sahani, Vice Chairman, Honorable Justice Bhavar Singh, Director General DME, Professor Dr. Ravikant Swami, Director DME, for their support in every endeavor being taken by DME Media School. Heartfelt thanks to Professor Dr. Amrish Saxena, Dean DME Media School, Professor Dr. Susmita Bala, Head DME Media School, for their motivation in planning and executing the flagship events at the Media School of DME. Thanks to Dr. Manasvi Maheshwari, Associate Professor and Associate Convener of ICAN5 for overall coordination, execution and planning of the International Media Conference. Thanks to Sumantra Sarthidas, Vishal Sahai, Assistant Professors at Media School, and Yogesh Sharma, Faculty at Media School for Digital and Production Support for ICAN5. Pramod Kumar Pandey for his efforts in supporting ICAN5. Thanks to Shruti V.S., Assistant Professor, Media School, for managing the technical and cultural team along with the students' coordination. Muhammad Kamil and Sukriti Arora, Assistant Professors at DME Media School, for newsletter, press briefings, and media coordination support. Dr. Ritika Saxena, Assistant Professor at Media School, for designing and creative support. Saima Pervez and Dr. Sumedha for the support in social media management. I thank Pawan Saxena, Anmol Mehta, Tulika Arora, CM Anand, Abhishek Yadav, and Jagan for administrative and logistics support. Student convener Priya Yadav for her consistent support for ICAN5 International Media Conference at Media School. All student coordinators from the newsletter, production, hospitality, anchoring, cultural and digital operations for their coordination and consistent efforts for the conference. Thanks to all the researchers, participants who have sent their full paper for this conference. Thanks to all the participants of various plenary sessions, workshop, master classes for attending the sessions at ICAN5. Special thanks to the conference partners, knowledge partners, international partners, cultural partners, and media partners. Now I request everyone to please switch on their cameras to have a group photograph. And I request the digital operation team to please. I request all the participants that our next plenary session is on the theme Embracing Diversity and Inclusion in Educational Campuses at 2:30 p.m. IST, and it will be in the physical space at Studio 62 of DME. And also the YouTube link of this session will be available in the playlist of ICAN5. Following this, the fourth panel discussion on the theme Journalism and Media Education in the United States, Perspective from International Graduate Student, will be held at 7:30 in the evening. So stay tuned, stay safe. Thank you, everyone.